Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Pakistan, the number of coronavirus patients has soared to nearly 800 with 6 fatalities. The Punjab government has announced a 2-week partial lockdown to spread the virus. The Azad Jammu and Kashmir government has also declared a 3-week partial lockdown to contain the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, authorities have decided to deploy the army across the country to help manage the situation. Pakistan is celebrating its National Day with simplicity amid coronavirus outbreak and with a pledge to fight the pandemic. In his message, Prime Minister Imran Khan called for national unity on the day to fight pandemic of coronavirus. The government has cancelled all kinds of public gatherings, including military parade, as a precautionary measure amid COVID-19. Pakistan Day commemorates Lahore Resolution presented on March 23, 1940, for a separate country for Muslims of the subcontinent. The Taliban and Afghan government have held a virtual meeting on prisoner release issue under the Doha Agreement. This is the first interaction between two sides since signing of peace agreement on February 29th.
U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said prisoners released by both sides will be an important step in the peace process. He said all sides conveyed their commitment to a reduction in violence, intra-Afghan talks, and a permanent ceasefire. Khalilzad said all involving parties have also agreed to a follow-on technical meeting in the next 2 days. Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said discussion was held in presence of Qatari and American representatives. He said only prisoners released were discussed, while other issues will be discussed during the intra-Afghan negotiations. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Afghanistan to meet with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and his rival Abdullah.
Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry says hasty measures taken by the U.S. administration for peace process are main reason of instability in Afghanistan. Foreign ministry said hurried deal with the Taliban and Washington's ignorance of domestic issues led to a political crisis in the war-torn country. In a statement, the ministry said Iran is alarmed by unpredictable consequences of disputes over Afghan presidential poll results. It said the U.S. signed peace deal with the Taliban for boosting election campaign of President Donald Trump. It said by prioritizing its self-interest, Washington has caused an escalation of political tensions in Afghanistan. The ministry said the Islamic Republic is closely monitoring political and security developments in the neighboring country. Moreover, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says the U.S. should lift sanctions if it wants to help Tehran contain the coronavirus outbreak. In a televised speech, Rouhani said Tehran has no intention of accepting Washington's offer of humanitarian assistance. Rouhani said Washington is responsible for a number of difficulties and issues Iranian society is currently facing. Earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said U.S. sanctions on Iran are impeding global fight against the coronavirus pandemic. In a tweet, Zarif said despite global pressure, Washington is not lifting curbs on Tehran. The foreign minister said only remedy in this situation is to defy Washington's mass punishment, as it is only moral imperative. Pakistan, China, and Russia have already asked the U.S. to lift Iran sanctions to combat the rising threat of COVID-19. In the New Zealand, Central Bank has decided to inject about $17 billion into financial system in a bid to stop a pandemic-induced financial rout. Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee says under the program, the bank will buy back state bonds to ease liquidity pressure. In Philippines, the central bank has approved about $6 billion program to buy back government securities. Additional liquidity will allow government to fund its projects to counter the impact of the virus. Meanwhile, World Bank said it is preparing to launch 40 COVID-19 aid projects worth over $1.5 billion. Bank's President David Malpass said funding can come out of a $14 billion fast-track facility, which was approved to help countries fighting coronavirus. Qatar has also announced to provide $150 million to support Gaza Strip in its fight against the pandemic. Meanwhile, New York's mayor says the city is about 10 days away from seeing widespread medical shortages and people will die due to it. New York State has become the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in the US and accounts for almost half of the country's cases. In an interview, Mayor Bill de Blasio said the outbreak will get worse, with damage accelerated by shortages of key medical supplies. The New York State has reported an increase of over 4,600 new cases of coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The new statistics show that the state alone has 5% of the global COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, 3 members of the US Congress have tested positive for the coronavirus, and at least 22 others went into self-quarantine. The head of Germany's Robert Koch Institute for Infectious Disease says the coronavirus cannot be transmitted through banknotes, but his remarks directly contradict the WHO's advice of washing hands right after handling currency bills. RKI head Lothar Wieler reiterates that droplets from infected individuals present the main risk of COVID-19 infection. He added, virus transmission through banknotes has no particular significance. Prior to this, some governments around the world had initiated programs to disinfect currency bills. In early March, the US Federal Reserve had begun quarantining dollar bills being repatriated from Asia. In Colombia, 23 people have died in a prison riot in the capital, Bogota. The country's justice ministry says 83 others were wounded. Officials said detainees were protesting unsanitary conditions amid the global outbreak of coronavirus. The justice minister said 7 prison guards were also wounded and 2 are in critical condition. The Indian country will enter a nationwide lockdown from Tuesday night. So far, 231 people have been infected with the disease in the country and 2 have died. In Brazil, 11 people have died and 17 others were injured after a bus collided into a truck in southeastern state of Minas Gerais. Federal Highway Police said the accident took place around dawn along a highway near the town of Pirapora. Officials said the bus driver entered the opposite lane, colliding head-on with a truck. The bus was heading from northeast Bahia state of the city of Paracatu in Minas Gerais. Officials said all of the fatal victims were men traveling aboard the bus. In India, the protests and sit-ins against controversial Citizenship Act have adapted themselves amid coronavirus pandemic. New Delhi has been facing countrywide demonstrations against the law, killing 83 people since December 11th. All women sit-in at Delhi's Shaheen Bagh is sticking to 5 protester limit, recording their protest against the law. The organizers said they will continue protest, keeping all the precautionary measures. Earlier yesterday, the protest was attacked once again after an unidentified individual threw a petrol bomb near the protest site. Meanwhile, the protesters across India have vowed to continue registering their protest through social media. The organizers have asked the protesters to record their videos against the law and share them on different online platforms. Israeli forces have killed a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. Palestine's health ministry says the youth was martyred in the Nile region west of Ramallah. A health official said another Palestinian was wounded and taken to the Palestine medical complex in Ramallah. The Israeli army said its troops fired towards suspects hurling rocks at their vehicles driving on a highway. There were no reports of injuries to the motorists. In Kenya, violence erupted in different parts of the country, including capital Conakry, after the opposition called to boycott the elections. Kenya went to polls on Sunday to elect members of parliament and vote on a constitutional referendum. Local media says the clashes broke out at the polling, causing delay to the start of the voting process. The opposition boycotted the referendum because They believe President Alpha Conde will use it to seek a third mandate. President's mandate expires in December. The twin referendum and legislative election poll was maintained despite the outbreak of coronavirus, which is gaining pace in sub-Saharan Africa. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. The Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba has donated protective and medical equipment to Ethiopia. The first batch of the apparatus has reached the capital Addis Ababa as the coronavirus cases soared above 1,100 across Africa. In a statement, the company's co-founder Jack Ma's Foundation said that the flight carried over 5 million face masks and kits for over 1 million detection tests. The local disease control center said that only patients with symptoms will be tested. In a tweet, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that the distribution of supplies will start from today. The virus has spread more slowly in Africa than in Asia and Europe, but has a foothold in 41 African nations. It has claimed 37 lives across the continent of 1.3 billion people so far. In the UK, scientists are set to track spread of new coronavirus and watch for emerging mutations by using gene sequencing. The government says it is setting up a £20 million project to track the spreads. Government's chief scientific advisor said genomic sequencing will help scientists understand COVID-19 and its spread. He said it can also help guide treatments in the future and see the impact of interventions. Researchers will collect data from samples from infected patients in England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. In epidemics, genome sequencing can help scientists monitor small changes in the virus at large scale to understand whether different strains are emerging. The COVID-19 pandemic may have put a damper on Mother's Day in Lebanon this year, but 3 students have come up with a new service to celebrate the occasion without flouting social distancing restrictions. This report will now tell you more.
In a quiet Lebanese town under lockdown over the novel coronavirus, a drone buzzed towards a balcony to deliver a red rose to a mother grinning in surprise. Down in the street in the coastal town of Jobinai, 18-year-old Christopher Ibrahim texts a teenager who has ordered a flower drop-off for his mother. He slips a single rose in a ring hanging under the aircraft, and it lifts off into the air to carry the flower to its intended recipient.
The idea is I'm a drone operator. I film weddings and events with a drone. I'm studying engineering at the Lebanese University in Romania. So I come up with the idea of flying rose, where on Mother's Day we will deliver a rose to mothers via drone.
For a week, most of Lebanese have been ordered to remain at home to stem the spread of COVID-19. The airport has closed and all non-essential businesses have been told to shutter.
Another part of the project is about helping our country. Everything that we make from the project will be contributed to the Red Cross because they are the ones who need support the most during this period.
Ibrahim said each rose delivery costs between 10,000 to 20,000 Lebanese pounds. He added that the earning of this project will go to the Red Cross.
In another news, World Bank has approved $170 million to improve Bangladesh sanitation services that will benefit 1.5 million residents. World Bank says Dhaka Sanitation Improvement Project will help improve cities' liability with safely managed sanitation services. The bank's country director for Bangladesh said 3.5 million people in Dhaka live in poor sanitation. She said the project will help ensure safe sanitation, which is essential for reducing public health risks as well as extreme poverty. In Dhaka, untreated domestic sewage and industrial effluent are illegally discharged into rivers and canals, causing pollution and flooding. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the world's water resources are under unprecedented threat. In his message to the World Water Day, Guterres said up to 4.4 billion people in the world will live with limited access to water. The UN chief said currently some 2.2 billion people lack safe drinking water and 4.2 billion people live without access to adequate sanitation. Talking about the solution, Guterres said the world needs to increase investments in healthy watersheds with dramatic improvements in the efficiency of water use. The UN chief asked all people to play a role to help alleviate the shortage of water. Oil prices have dropped after a $1 trillion Senate proposal to help coronavirus hit American economy was defeated. Brent crude futures fell 4% to below $26 a barrel, while WTI crude futures dropped nearly 1% to about $22.5 a barrel. Oil prices have fallen for 4 straight weeks and have lost about 60% since the start of the year. Latest drop came after the proposal garnered zero support from Democrats and failed to pass key Senate procedural vote. The stalemate came hours after Democratic leaders warned the rescue package bails out big companies and offers less to help workers. European markets have slumped as coronavirus outbreak continues to take its toll on international community and financial markets. Investors have resorted to panic selling after $1 trillion fiscal stimulus bill failed a key procedural Senate vote. Frankfurt's DAX and FTSE 100 have plunged about 4.5%. CAC 40 in Paris trading over 4% lower. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi plunged over 5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng closed about 5% lower. Shanghai Composite lost the ground, while Nikkei 225 bucked up the trend. Let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.